The new theater of the mind. The Bruce Collins Show.
Welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show. We're very glad to have you join us. Tonight we talk about the politics of the day and even a conspiracy or two with veteran radio host Josh Bernstein. And with a loud metallic clang, we slam the prison doors shut with the story of David Merkatz and his book, Wrongly Charged, which also shows you how to deal with the police and our legal system should you ever be charged for a crime you did not commit. The Bruce Collins Show airs every Friday night at midnight right here at WWPR 1490 AM. The Bruce Collins Show is a lot like Capitol Hill or your favorite Chinese restaurant. You might not want to know what goes on behind the scenes. You can listen to past archives of the Bruce Collins Show at ipbn-fm.com. That's ipbn-fm.com. There's a banner just for the Bruce Collins Show on the Intrepid Paradigm Broadcasting Network website. Click on the show banner and you will go right to our page. We would appreciate it if you're able to spread the word for our show by word of mouth, social media, or in whatever creative way you can. Also, we have a Facebook page for the Bruce Collins Show. Please like us there. And you can email the show at bruce_collins_show@AOL.com. The Bruce Collins Show also has a YouTube channel. Visit YouTube, search for the Bruce Collins Show channel, subscribe, and catch all the latest shows on YouTube. And now let me introduce my co-host, Chad Miles. He's a former congressional candidate in Michigan and a military veteran and is the founder and webmaster at Conspiria.net. You can go to Conspiria.net tonight and check out what's going on there. You can also find out more information on Chad at ChadMiles.com. He is radio's lethal weapon, Chad Miles. In fact, you know, Chad is such a science geek that if you broke into his house, snuck into his bedroom, pulled back the covers, and slit open the mattress, you would see that Chad sleeps on Tesla coils. Welcome back to the program, Chad.
Hey, Bruce. I would not want to be anywhere else but right here.
Now, what have you been up to lately, Chad?
You know, I get the weird feeling that the NSA is spying on our show.
You said that last time. Are you a rerun?
No, I just still have that feeling that the show is being watched.
And, of course, I'm sure there's still a cat in black following Senior Pickles.
Oh, yes, Senior Pickles is totally on the edge. He hasn't even been eating his milk bones.
Wow. You know, I've seen Senior Pickles' picture on Facebook, as I'm sure many others have. Chad's been posting that picture of Senior Pickles on Facebook. And I have to say, I'm sorry, but what an ugly dog. His schnoz is so big, I bet he gets fan mail from elephants.
Hey, watch it.
Well, he looks like he needs a diet anyway, so maybe his lack of milk bones is to his benefit.
Maybe. Hey, how have you been, Bruce?
You know, I'm glad you asked. I've been thinking of my past and when I used to sail the seven seas. As many of you know, a couple weeks ago I told my story about how I wrote a poem about the seas, and it was such a beautiful poem. You know, I spent half of my life underwater. I was ambidextrous.
You mean amphibious?
Good point. I used to fib a lot, too. I used to tell a lot of fish stories.
No, amphibious does not mean to fib. Amphibious means you can live underwater.
You have some strange theories, Chad. I suppose you believe in Atlantis.
No, I don't believe in Atlantis.
Oh, yeah? Well, where did Atlanta come from?
Atlanta is a city in the United States.
Oh, your geography is all messed up, Chad. Atlanta is underwater.
So their citizens are amphibious?
Yeah, exactly. You can't trust a word they say.
We're not going to get anywhere with this conversation.
Yes, it's going to take me some time to teach you how to read a map.
You can't use that Hobbit map from the Lord of the Rings this time.
Hey, I've gotten a lot of mileage out of that map.
Well, it's not the mileage, it's the destination.
Whoa. You know what? That was really profound. I have to say that from the bottom of my heart. I don't know what it means, but I can tell you it was very profound. Say, weren't you going to tell us about some research you've been doing? Didn't you tell us that last time?
Yeah, that's right. As I mentioned last time on the show, I've been doing some research on an underground base.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I only hope the NSA doesn't try something while I'm trying to discuss this.
Me too. So when you say underground as an underground base, then that would be amphibious, right?
No, it's underground, not underwater.
No, I meant, is it a fib?
Amphibious is not a fib.
Okay, I'm getting really confused, Chad. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about your research?
Okay. A man from a top secret strike force contacted me to reveal this information. He felt that it was time the public was told about this top secret base. The base is in New Mexico. I met him in a coffee house in Seattle, and we took a private jet to a landing base. I was then escorted to a large gated facility that was guarded 24 hours a day. Once inside, I had to put on a and then I took an elevator down. I estimate it was about 150 feet below. At first, I saw a very large room, and then I saw these beings seemed to be friendly, but it wasn't long before and started firing at the soldiers. The wailing and the moans of pain were. I saw an alien trying to. There were Nephilim. There were disease and experiments with giant. I risked life and limb to. I had blood and guts out, and now I'm able to tell about what happened while I was there.
Wow! That was amazing information. And, you know, I'm so glad we were able to get that out with apparently no interruptions from the NSA.
Yeah, I guess all my worries about the NSA spying on me were all a fantasy of my imagination.
Either that or you're amphibious.
That doesn't mean lying.
How can I trust you if you're amphibious?
Oh, brother.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, up next, Josh Bernstein paddles through the political muck. Maybe he's amphibious too. And David Merkatz tells you how to paddle through the legal muck in a moment. And joining us this week is Josh Bernstein. Josh Bernstein is a radio talk show host, spokesman, strategist, and writer. And he is one of the brightest, most quick-witted intellectual minds in conservative media today. Besides doing his own show, he is proud to be the official spokesman for the Association of Mature American Citizens. That's AMAC, and you can find them at amac.us. In addition, he is also ranked in the Top Talk Radio's Top 100 list of conservative all-stars and the director of communications of another large conservative group that focuses on limiting the size of government and expanding liberty and freedom. Josh Bernstein, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Oh, it's wonderful to be with you.
Now, Josh, before we talk about some of the topics of the day, can you tell our listeners where you can be found on the Internet?
Absolutely. You can go to my website, which is www.joshbernstein, spelled Bernstein, Josh Bernstein, politicalwriter.com. Now, I've had that same URL for a long, long time. I don't do nearly as much writing as I do talking, but I still have that URL. So it's joshbernsteinpoliticalwriter.com, or you can just go to Google, put in Josh Bernstein radio talk show host, and I'm pretty confident you'll find 5 or 6 pages of my stuff.
Absolutely. I know I did. Now, I think I read somewhere on one of these websites, or maybe it was in an introduction on a website, that you were raised in a liberal home. How did you make the change to the conservative philosophy?
That's a great question. Yes, I grew up in a liberal home, 2 liberal Jewish parents, and was basically sheltered, I guess you can say, in a certain area of the country, and on the East Coast. And when I moved out west and kind of got to experience what real America is, flyover country, as the left likes to make fun of, I was able to kind of see that there's a lot of things that are a lot different from where I grew up. And I think that that mentality that we see on the East Coast, and there's a lot of liberals out on the East Coast, and, when you go out west, there's a lot less liberals. Some pockets of them, of course, here and there, but I think it's all about God and country and things like that, and you start to, understand a little bit more about what's going on in your surroundings, and then you start to realize that maybe some of the things that you're hearing on ABC, NBC, CBS, and what have you aren't exactly the truth, and there's an agenda behind it. And I think that once you kind of figure that out and then find talk radio, that's really where the switch happens, because you could think back to how many people, Ronald Reagan is a good example, was a former Democrat turned Republican, even Donald Trump in the news now, again, a former Democrat, now Republican. You never hear, I used to be a Republican, but then I turned into a Democrat, right? You never do that. You always hear, I used to be a Democrat, but then I figured out what's really going on in the world, and I became more conservative. So just like anything else, I wasn't necessarily a Democrat or a liberal. I just was kind of apolitical, didn't really pay attention. And then ultimately the events of 9/11 really changed my life because, again, I wanted to know the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why, and did some research. And once you find talk radio, you're usually 6 to 8 months ahead of everybody else.
I used to live, I live in the Bay Area, California now, but I used to, which is a bastion of liberal ideology, unfortunately.
Yes, it is.
But, so please pray for me. But, I lived my teenage years in Tucson, Arizona. How did you make it to Phoenix?
I actually left home at about 21 years old. I'm the youngest of three. And just kind of decided that I just had this feeling, kind of this overwhelming kind of epiphany that I was going to be in my 30s and I was going to be stuck in the same area, talking to the same people that I grew up with about the same things. And I said, wait a minute, there's got to be something else that's better. And I decided to kind of do some research on different areas of the country and came to understand Phoenix and the economy at the time. This is back in 1996, and it was really booming then. And, basically withdrew from my college courses, ended up driving across the country with a good buddy of mine. He ended up going to Tucson and ended up hanging out in Tucson for about a month or so and then flying home. And I actually stayed out here. I had some friends of the family that moved out here, and I had a place to stay for a little while. And after 8 days of being here, I had a job in an apartment and kind of started my life. And now I can't leave the area because I have an 8-year-old son, and I wouldn't want to be far away from him.
Yes, absolutely. Tucson, Arizona, the city that every other high school is named after a cactus. I graduated from Saguaro. Anyway.
Saguaro, there you go.
Now, looking at the presidential candidates and the way the media is reacting, there seems to be a disconnect right now between the public support of Donald Trump. And I gotta say, when I'm a conservative fiscally and socially, but when I hear him talk, he's pretty energetic. It's very he's reaching right into the heart, I think, of Republican values. But so he has this public support of the Republican Party, seems to be, many of us at least, and the media's treatment of Trump is far different. Can you talk about the contrast going on there?
Oh, without a doubt. I went down to the event in Arizona in which there was 15,000 people. Luckily, I'm a member of the press, and I didn't have to wait out in 107-degree heat for 3 blocks to get into the event, because that's what, unfortunately, people had to do. But once inside the event, it was absolutely electrifying. And I think, that contrast that you speak of is very distinct, because the establishment class of Republicans, they have anointed Jeb Bush as the nominee. All right, they don't care about Scott Walker, Ted Cruz, they don't care about anybody else. That's the guy that they want. Now all of a sudden this billionaire mogul who they can't control, who they can't silence, starts coming into the race and saying, hey, what about me? Here's what I want to do. I'm not beholden to anybody. I don't have to go around. I don't need the name recognition. Everybody knows who I am. I'm as popular as a Kardashian. I mean, if you did a man on the street. So here's someone that doesn't have to go to Iowa and eat fried Twinkies and hold and kiss babies. I mean, he's the Donald. So he already has the name recognition, and therefore he can self-fund. And that's the danger for the establishment, and in particular, Jeb Bush. Mm-hmm. And look, he's doing something that no other candidate is doing. He is awakening that sleeping giant, that silent majority that for whatever reason, 7-8 million of them stayed home in 2012. They didn't like Mitt Romney. They didn't see a clear and distinct difference, maybe. I don't know. I obviously voted for Mitt Romney, and I was hoping that millions more would have, but they didn't. You could also add in, of course, the voter fraud that took place.
Right.
But anyway, nonetheless, you look at the whole situation. What he has done is awoken those people that couldn't tell the difference between the two parties. And to a point to where the establishment is so freaked out, they don't even want him on the debate stage. And the reason they don't is because they are not prepared to handle the ramifications of what he might say to their hand-picked establishment candidate. Mm-hmm. Now, putting all that together, one of the things that Donald has done is he is combative. You know, there's something the left has liked to tell Republicans for the longest time. You have to be compassionate. You have to show that you care, that you're insightful, that you're inclusive. No, you don't, because when you do that, then you lose your edge. You lose, your principles and your values. What he's doing is being combative. And a combative conservative is always going to be better in the eyes of the people than a compassionate conservative, because a combative conservative is going to handle the press, is going to tell it like it is, and if you don't like it, that's okay. He's got $1 billion. He doesn't need to do this. I genuinely believe, yes, it's about Donald Trump, but it's also about him honestly and truly wanting to save the country.
And there's been several Republicans, not just the liberal media, but several Republicans have come up and said, he's killing the party. And I saw Carly Fiorina saying initially that. Is this, and yet when I look at social media, I'll see people say, the more they hate on Trump, the more I support him. So is this going to backfire?
Exactly.
Is this going to backfire for the other Republicans?
I think what's interesting about that, I was actually on a television show a couple of days ago, and the host asked me, is Trump hurting the brand? And I said, not only is he not hurting the brand, I said, what's hurting the brand is when people go out and make phone calls and put up signs and tell their friends and neighbors and pray and do all these things to get Republicans elected in November of 2014, and Republicans come in, they've got a clear majority in the Senate and in the House, a supermajority in the House, and they squander all of their political capital and sign on and be the cheerleader to Barack Obama. That's what's hurting the brand. What else is hurting the brand is doing 45 or so symbolic votes to defund Obamacare instead of actually doing it. That's hurting the brand. Giving Barack Obama more executive authority through trade promotion authority, that's hurting the brand. So, look, for any of these pundits out there, and I actually put a challenge out there to any of them to come on my show and tell me that, he's hurting the brand, I would like to have that discussion, because I don't believe he is.
Exactly. Do you see a landslide for Republicans in 2016, potentially? I
do not. I'll explain why in a minute, but I actually said when this all went down with the Supreme Court decision upholding Obamacare for the second time and then passing gay marriage, I said that this has been the most detrimental 2 weeks in American history in the 21st century so far. And people are like, wow, that's a really strong statement. I said, well, it was, and it is. I mean, look what happened in 2 weeks. They literally took a racist white kid who went into a church, shot to death 9 innocent black people in a church. Then, because he had a Confederate flag on his car, were able to systematically remove, by using this, again, Rahm Emanuel, never let a good crisis go to waste, systematically removing all of the South's heritage and history, and simultaneously blaming it on the Republicans. You want to talk about winning the propaganda war, the left has just absolutely obliterated the conservatives in that capacity. And I'm going to point that stuff out. Now, I'm a supporter of the Confederate flag, not because of anything more than the fact that I don't see this flag as the majority of the media do. They see this flag as a racist flag. I look at its history. I see that this flag is a global symbol, by the way, for tyranny against government. As a matter of fact, in 1989, at the Berlin Wall, what was the flag that was flown as the Berlin Wall was coming down? It was the Confederate flag. So the Confederate flag is a long, long history. Some good, some bad, of course. But ultimately, I mean, the stars and bars, it went through, 7 or 8 different variations. It was there for state rights, and it was there for Southern pride, Southern heritage. It was not there for racism and slavery and everything else. What happened is it was hijacked later, years later, in the 50s and 60s by the Democratic, Southern Democrats and the KKK. And when they hijacked it, then they used it as a symbol of hate against blacks, against Jews, against Northeast Republicans that were trying to get them to change the evils of their ways. So I look at the entire history. I see heritage, not hate. I was fortunate enough to have the gentleman that went into Walmart in Slidell, Louisiana on my show last week. This is the guy that went in, wanted to get a Confederate flag cake made. They told him no. He came back the next day to a different Walmart and said, I want the ISIS cake made. They said, sure, no problem. I had that guy on my show at an exclusive interview. I was talking to him about it, and he said that he's outraged, absolutely outraged that all of the Southern pride and heritage is being stripped out. And I look at the banning of the flag as an attack on our Christian Judeo principles and as a veiled threat against the American flag. And the reason I say that is because when this first started, I said, okay, do you honestly think they're going to stop at the Confederate flag? No, they're going to come after the American flag next. And there's already been professors at colleges that have said that they want to ban the American flag. We saw what these animals are doing, pretending to either defecate or urinate on the American flag. They're having contests. So it's going that direction. It's extremely scary. And I believe that this opened up Pandora's box by banning the one flag. The left is not going to stop there. They're going to want to go after the American flag as well.
When a tragedy happens, one thing that I don't understand is that, for instance, terrorism on the airlines, all of a sudden we get body scanners within a week. A shooting, Dylan Roof goes to this church and tragically kills people in this church, and all of a sudden we're attacking the Confederate flag. Are these points that the liberals use during tragedies that they know to jump on? How are they able to react so fast?
I think you're absolutely right. I think the left has been able to use identity politics and class warfare and divisiveness for years to win elections, to win close races. You couple that, you throw in some voter fraud, and the next thing you know, this is where you're at. That's one aspect of it. But the other aspect, and I think this is the more ingenious aspect of the left, is they have been able to mind control establishment Republicans into thinking that if they act a certain way, that they'll win elections and they can compete in elections in the future. And the establishment Republicans have bought into this mind control that the left has put out there. And you can clearly see it by this decision. I mean, immediately, Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina, immediately decided that she was going to ban the flag. You can see all these people coming out against it. And again, we're losing our mind. And I think the left understands that. Again, Rahm Emanuel, never let a good crisis go to waste. Let's always try to capitalize on whatever this crisis is. In this case, that's what it was. Let's get rid of the Confederate flag. How are we going to do it? Okay, let's exploit the fact that this, Southern Democrat, racist kid had a Confederate flag on his car. And, let's go after guns next. Let's go after this next. And it's this relentless attack against our foundation that, is unrelenting.
And it's interesting because Dylan Roof had a Confederate flag he was holding in one of the pictures, and he had a Gold's Gym tank top. I wrote a book with the guy that designed the Gold's Gym logo, and his name is Rick Drayson, and he's Jewish. Well, they didn't try to ban Gold's Gym T-shirts, so it's kind of bizarre. But anyway, now up north.
Well, not only that, I mean, think of it this: what about the fact that now the gay flag is being flown all over the place, but yet you can't, fly the Confederate flag? I mean, look, if you're going to ban one thing that's offensive to X, Y, Z, why don't you ban the other one that's offensive to ABC? I mean, the bottom line is, Facebook has just announced that they're now going to ban people that even put the image of the Confederate flag out there. You want to talk about censorship in the 21st century? I can't wait until next year's Free Countries Index come out. I guarantee you we're not even in the top 50 anymore.
Right. And TV Land banned the Dukes of Hazzard, but yet
unbelievable.
Hogan's Heroes is on TV, which is about Nazis who killed 6 million Jews.
Exactly. It's pick and choose what is offensive and what's not.
Yes, absolutely. Now, up north from my location in San Francisco, we recently had a tragic murder. Of course, this has made the national news. And it was perpetrated by an illegal alien who has been deported 5 times. So is the concept of sanctuary cities, is this hurting the liberal agenda right now?
That's a good question. I think with the amount of illegal aliens in this country, and again, I don't believe it's 11 million. I believe it's north of 40 million. I think they've been talking about, 11 million for 25 or 30 years. But I think with everything that's going on and how dominant the media is towards the left and propping up the left, that's a good question. I will tell you this. There's 347,000 criminal aliens walking the streets right now as we speak.
Wow.
And at least 121 of them have murdered people, and they are a direct result of Obama's lax immigration policies. That's from the Washington Post. 37% of all federal crimes involve illegal aliens. And, again, you have people out there doing these horrific things. And, again, these sanctuary cities, there's over 200 sanctuary cities. I would really love to see these cities be completely defunded and just say, look, if you're going to harbor illegal aliens in your city, we're cutting off everything. Park services, welfare, the whole thing. Just shut it down and force them. Look, we have the Congress right now. We hold the purse strings. We've never used it since we've taken over the House, it seems. We could have stopped Obamacare because Obamacare was relegated to tax by the Supreme Court. And if we're the ones that implement and take away taxes, we could have just, repealed the tax, the Obamacare tax, but we didn't do that. So I would like to see us finally use our purse strings in the House to defund all of these cities. Let them scramble and let them, suffer a little bit, and maybe they'll change their ways, because otherwise I don't see how they're going to do it.
So when we see military exercises like Jade Helm, and we hear about people talking about these events being precursors to martial law, do you think there's any truth to these views?
Well, look, there's been a lot of people talking about this Jade Helm exercise, myself included. I've talked about it at length. I think that there's some concerns there. I mean, let's face it, they labeled certain states during this exercise as hostile territory, one of them being the main state of Texas. Now, when I look at this thing and I notice what's going on, number one, I want to congratulate Abbott, the governor, because he was smart enough to have the Texas Guard actually be in charge of monitoring Jade Helm, not the Texas National Guard, but the State Guard, because they report directly to the governor. But ultimately, I look at why this exercise even needs to take place. And when you think about it, we don't even need to do this, because we have set up all kinds of things that are around the country and in different states that will, simulate, if you will, certain areas. And that's what the government is trying to say, that we're doing this because it's an exercise. We want to find out, if we can blend in and this and that. Well, meanwhile, you've got the Mojave Desert, Fort Irwin, which is about the size of Rhode Island, they created a fake town called Erdabat Shar, which is supposed to simulate Afghanistan. In fact, it is a national training center in which all U.S. troops must spend at least 21 days at before they deploy overseas. Another one is Yodaville, which is, again, is a fake Iraqi town in the Arizona desert that's used for bombing simulations and raids and things like that. They've got 4-story high buildings that they built that are abandoned, that they've blown up and things like that. So when I put all that together and I look at everything and I go, why do we need to do this, on the streets in Texas or in Utah or Colorado or wherever else that it's being done? You have these simulated cities that you've built by the military to do these exercises. So for me, right then and there, I look at that and say, why even do this? Because you already have the ability to find and work these exercises out without involving the general public.
So we've been hearing very little from the mainstream media about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We've been hearing more about it from gentlemen like yourself. Can you drill down and tell us how this impacts American companies?
Well, it impacts American companies in a lot of different ways. One of the ways that it does is that it would actually empower foreign companies to use new foreign tribunals because, again, everything will be set up through the United Nations and through these, foreign tribunal authorities. And what that would do is it would have these new foreign tribunals enforce special privileges only available to them. And so what's even worse than that is it would also exempt these foreign companies from, let's say, EPA standards and financial standards that normally our Constitution would make them have to uphold. And it would allow them to skirt these issues, environmental issues, things like that. And if an American company complained about it, they would just say, okay, fine, let's go to the UN. Well, we already know that the UN tribunals and everything else are typically anti-American. So more than likely that they would side with the foreign company. There's over 700 foreign-owned companies that operate in the United States. So it would put a clear financial disadvantage to American companies, for sure.
In the introduction, we said that you are the official spokesman for the Association of Mature American Citizens. Can you contrast this organization with AARP for our listeners?
Absolutely. The Association of Mature American Citizens is a great organization. We are the conservative alternative to groups out there like AARP. And what we do is when we do lobby on behalf of Congress to pass, laws and new legislation for health care, we answer not to the lobbyists, but we answer to our members. And everything that we do, every decision that we make is what's best for seniors. What's going to give seniors the most choice in their health care decisions, not having the government run their health care. We didn't get $2.8 billion in subsidies from the Obama administration for our support for Obamacare and then turn around and secretly exempt all of our members like AARP did. So ultimately, there's a huge difference. It is David and Goliath. We have 1.5 million members and growing strong. And if people want to learn a little bit more, we have same type of programs that are out there that AARP offers. But again, your money is going to conservative, principled causes. And I think that's truly the difference. It's only $16 a year to join. You can call 1-888-262-2006. Again, 888-262-2006. Or you can go to www.amac.us. Again, www.amac.us. amac.us, and we've been speaking with Josh Bernstein of The Josh Bernstein Show. You can find out more information about Josh at joshbernsteinpoliticalwriter.com. That's joshbernsteinpoliticalwriter.com. Josh, thank you so much for joining us this week. Absolutely. It was my pleasure, and anytime you want me back, you just let my folks know, and we'll make that happen.
Great. And joining us this week is David Merkatz. He is the author of Wrongly Charged, A Look at the Legal System. In this book, author David Merkatz teaches every aspect of how the legal system really works, from arrests to bail bonds to the appeals process. He has a vast knowledge of legal experience, and as you'll find out in this book, included in his book is the landmark decision that he won in 1989, Merkatz versus the Department of State. This book, Wrongly Charged, is a great lesson in an easy-to-read format on the entire legal system. David Merkatz, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's great to have you on. Now, I want to ask you different aspects of the legal system, but before we do that, could we talk about your experience? You were a locksmith, and it sounds like something went terribly wrong. What happened?
Well, when I moved down to South Florida in the late 80s, the system here, there's no licensing regulations of any kind for locksmiths. So anybody can come down here. They don't have to be fingerprinted. There's no regulations of any kind. So the industry got very flooded. So by the year 2000, people stopped using the yellow pages. Business just became awful. So what we did is what a lot of businesses do. We advertised, put up a bunch of websites, and we registered them legally in Florida under the Fictitious Name Act. And some of the names that we used were similar in nature to some of the larger companies. But when you put our website next to the competitor's website, it looked nothing like it. And in fact, at the bottom, we said we are not the other company, and we had a click-through link to their website. But naturally, we did get some calls from the other company because it was a similar name, and and that's how we got some extra business. Wasn't something nice to do, but before we did that, we checked with 3 or 4 attorneys, and everybody told us that in order for anybody to do anything about it, they'd have to send you a cease and desist letter or file a civil lawsuit. But there was no criminal act at all because it goes on every day. People come out with a product or a service, and someone comes out with something similar. But what happened is, after doing it for 5 years with just a few complaints from the competitors, in February of 2013, one of the companies that we did it to just happens to be in Palm Beach County and does all the work for the town of Palm Beach, including the police department. So what they did is they gave us a call and said, we need our lock rekeyed. And we sent up one of our independent contractors who actually works for several companies. And he went up to the location, he knocked on the door, they showed him the lock that they wanted to change the cylinder or rekey, and he took it to his truck, took it apart, rekeyed it, put it back on the door. They tried the keys, everything was fine. They actually paid him for the job. Everything was done, and as he was walking out and he went to his truck, they knocked him to the ground and said, an occupied dwelling, grand theft, and impersonation. And that's how the story began.
How do you define what happened to you? Was it sloppy police work or incompetence? What was it?
Well, it was a vendetta. Basically, what happens is, this particular company, out of the few others, does the work for the town of Palm Beach, and they were friends with the police. So rather than, doing it properly and sending a cease and desist letter, your name is too similar. Remember, Florida could have denied the registration if it was too similar, but they didn't. And they allowed us to use the name legally. So it was a vendetta to help their friend. And they didn't stop there. They went on to arrest another one of our technicians. They called him in for an interview, charged him again, And the problem with the criminal justice system, which people don't realize, you can be arrested, have to bond out of jail, pay all the bond fees, attorney's fees, and they could just dismiss the charges 3 or 6 months later, and you're still liable for all those court costs, attorney's fees. The laws need to be changed, but that's why the police can get away and do that.
One thing that I did was Googled your name, and I'm taken to Florida news channels with your story. Now that you've been righted the wrong, even though they can never make it fully right, is there a way for you to be able to force these news channels to print a retraction?
Well, see, it's an interesting concept because every station that I've been on, except for very few, have not been in Florida. they really don't want to have me on in Florida, in the local area where I'm at, because they spent a lot of taxpayer money. An 8-month investigation, they hired forensic experts, the detective involved got an award for these 3 arrests, and nobody got convicted of anything, even in my case, which at the end, unfortunately, they didn't want to drop all the charges. And I didn't want to spend another $35,000 in unrefundable legal fees to go for a trial, so I took a plea to a petty theft charge with adjudication withheld, which means there's no criminal conviction, just to get it over with. And that's what a lot of people do. They plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit because they run out of money. But you can't force them to take it off, and you can't force them to, Google to take this stuff off until the case is sealed or expunged. But it actually worked out good for me. I don't care if it stays on there.
Okay. So a company was trying to get after you for using a similar name. But what was the charges? What were they saying that you had done wrong?
Well, in my case, when 3 or 4 months later, they issued a warrant for my arrest for organized scheme to defraud, money laundering, and impersonation. And you know what the interesting thing is? The impersonation charge, when it was formally filed, the state attorney actually dropped on all 3 of us the impersonation charge, which I found very weird because I thought that was the reason they filed the case to begin with.
So, David, I can imagine after hearing your story of many reasons why you would write this book. You've given us some context here, but what, in your words, made you decide to write this book?
Well, I wanted to get my story out there, and I wanted to show how the taxpayers' money was wasted on an 8-month investigation, and why people plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit, and how the system actually really works when you're arrested, and that you're not allowed to make a phone call for 6 to 10 hours till you process through the system, and why people are pleading guilty to charges. I have a lot of other stories in there other than mine.
And again, the book is Wrongly Charged by David Merkatz, and the website is wronglycharged.com. Why do you say, David, that I should always carry a bail bondsman's business card in my wallet?
Okay, because first of all, a lot of people can get pulled over for a traffic stop, and the name could be similar. There could be a warrant for your arrest. Now, when you're arrested, you're taken down to the police station, and it takes about an hour till they do what they have to do before they actually bring you down to central booking. And then they put you in a cell, and you can sit there probably for 6 to 8 hours. At that point, they call your name. They read you the charges, and then, and only then, are you allowed 1 phone call. So if you call a relative and they don't answer the phone or the line is busy, that's the end of your phone call till the next day. A bail bondsman always answers his phone because that's what they do. It's 24/7, and they can actually electronically today, with the technology, if it's a minor charge or a minor felony, bond you out instantly by a press of a button.
Are there really thousands of people sitting in jail for crimes they did not commit?
Oh, yes. I actually have a whole chapter in there of wrongly convicted, and some of them are right here in the state of Florida, where there, terrible stories with videos how people get out of jail thanks to the Innocence Project, who does DNA testing, and they take a lot of cases pro bono. And there was one guy in my book that actually died, and they exonerated him, but it was too late. He spent 20 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. It goes on every day, and there's no compensation with the exception of a few states.
Wow, that's horrible. Now, why do so many people, David, actually plead guilty to crimes they did not commit?
Well, take me for an example. When it got down to my case, I already had $60,000 in legal fees. Now, if I decided that I wanted to try the case, which I thought about doing, I would have had to spend another $35,000. Now, the reason is fear and money. The fear factor is in Florida, the organized scheme to defraud charge. Very interesting statute. All they have to prove is that you misrepresented yourself in some fashion. So if they can convince a jury that we said we were this company and we weren't this company, and they can twist it around, even if nobody got hurt, they got their locks changed, everybody was happy with the service. It's a very vague statute. And the next problem is, if you're found guilty of the organized scheme to defraud under the Florida Money Laundering Act, you're automatically a money launderer because you were found guilty of the organized scheme, so you made money off an illegal activity. So then you have the possibility of 15 to 20 years in state prison for something that is amazingly a common thing that happens every day. So that's the fear, and the money is that if I took the trial and I'm found not guilty, now instead of being out $60,000, I'm out $85,000 or $90,000, you know.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of people take the plea.
One thing that I've always wondered, and that's why I'm glad your book is here, why do some people get more jail time for the exact same crime than others?
That's because what they do is they score you. For example, let's say you got arrested for shoplifting and it was $1,000. It was a grand theft charge. That's what they call it. But you have never done anything wrong. You got a clean record. The possible sentence could be up to 5 years. But if I got arrested and I have a prior, they score you. They're allowed to take your prior criminal activity and add it in there. So instead of getting the 5 years, I could get the maximum of 15 years. They're allowed to add points for the prior offenses.
Again, the book is Wrongly Charged by David Merkatz. I highly recommend this book. One question I have is, can I really get out of jail if I'm arrested without seeing a judge?
Absolutely. But you have to follow some real quick procedures. Number one, if it's a non-violent charge, even if it's a felony, we're not talking about a murder or an armed robbery. We're talking about a shoplifting or a grand theft or anything that's non-violent, a white-collar crime. When the charges are read to you, they actually, in most states, in fact, all states have what's called a set bond before you go to a magistrate court. And they'll tell you your bond is $5,000. Now, the problem is if you have a bail bondsman, you can do this real quick. You have about an hour to an hour and a half once those bond set amounts are read to you. If you contact the bail bondsman, they can electronically post the bond quickly, meet you. You'll be bonded out within 2 hours or 3 hours, and as long as there's no outstanding warrants, and then you can sign your paperwork with the bondsman. But if you don't do that within the first 2 or 3 hours, you'll be taken down to another section and held overnight to go to the magistrate court.
A lot of great information here. What about the ability to talk my way out of a traffic ticket? Can I really do that?
I've done it a lot. Most people don't realize when you get pulled over by a police officer, you must be very nice. The first thing that they're going to ask you when you get pulled over is always, do you know why I pulled you over? Now, you really don't want to tell them, but most people know what they did wrong. So when I get pulled over, I always tell them, yes, I made some sort of a mistake. Otherwise, you wouldn't have pulled me over. I shower the police officer with kindness because they're looking for somebody to be angry. And if you shower them with kindness, most of the time, and you'd be even if they do give you the ticket, and you still say thank you and all of that, a lot of people are unaware, because I've defended a few traffic tickets, the few that I've gotten, not too many. They write notes on the back of the ticket on your behavior when they gave you the ticket. And a lot of times, if you're really polite and it's something minor, they won't even show up in court and you'll win by default.
I didn't even know that. Why do you lose even if you win at trial? Well,
you lose because until the system is changed, when the jury comes back with the not guilty verdict, you're not guilty. That stuff would still be all over the internet. Very hard to get it off. And the monetary costs, the bail bond fees, the time you spent in jail, if any, and all your attorney's fees. See, that's why I'm advocating the laws need to be changed. Like in a civil case, if I sue you and I win, I can ask for court costs and attorney's fees. In my case, if the prosecutors knew, which they were, that these cases were weak, they had no real case, they were going to have to reimburse the three of us $150,000 in court costs and attorney's fees. These cases would never be filed. But unfortunately, the system doesn't work that way. So people, pay them money, and you can be punished monetarily even if they dismiss the charges.
What about this? Can I stay out of jail if I'm found guilty at a trial?
Yes. Unless it's a murder charge or a real violent felony, you can file an appeal with the next court. In Florida, for example, the 4th District Court of Appeals, but in any state there is an appellate court, and you can post what's called an appellate bond. And if it's a nonviolent charge, most judges will allow an appellate bond during the course of the appeal, so you don't have to sit in jail and wait for the appeal, which could take up to 2 years.
Wow, this is a very eye-opening, informative interview and a very eye-opening and informative book, Wrongly Charged, by David Merkatz. Now, David, if I accept an offer of probation, do I really give up most of my rights?
You give up about 99% of your rights. Like in my case, for example, I took the offer of probation. Now, when you take probation, you are agreeing to unwarranted searches. That's number one. So that means if a probation officer comes to your home, they don't need a warrant. If you don't let them come and search your home, it's a violation of probation and you'll be held without bond. The same thing with a traffic stop. A regular person gets pulled over for a traffic stop, they can refuse the car to be searched. But somebody that's on probation, when they swipe your license in the computer, it sees that that you're on probation. They can tell you they want to search your car, and you must consent to it. And the other things with probation is you can't leave the county, so you got to be very, very careful when you're on probation.
Now, before you go, I know our listeners are going to want to know where they can get a copy of this book, Wrongly Charged. Again, it's by David Merkatz. Where can they go to find this book?
The book is available at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and Books A Million. The paperback is $17.95. The e-book is currently discounted for the next 60 days at only 99 cents. You can download it. And 10% of the profits of the book are being donated to a fund to help other people that were wrongly charged or wrongly convicted.
Excellent. And again, the book is Wrongly Charged by David Merkatz. David, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining us here at the Bruce Collins Show, where you can find us every Friday night at midnight here at WWPR 1490 AM. Remember, God loves you. We do too. Don't give up.